So we're going to talk about Vesalius, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, do we want to do any introductions? Do we want to talk about our great process trying to figure out a logo for this show? Because that was pretty entertaining.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I felt kind of bad about just bombing you with text messages of different...
Well, it was okay. It was just yesterday I was at my church gig, so I was running sound, and then I was like, oh, that's fun. It was like, oh, but I do also have to run sound.
Yeah. No, understandable. Although I will admit, I did more schoolwork than maybe I should have when I was working my sound gig. Although I was a student, so it wasn't my bread and butter.
Yeah. No, I mean, they pay me well, so I feel like I should.
Oh, for sure. But there is a lot of downtime, obviously, as a sound person. I guess I don't know what the professional...
Well, not really with this job, just because it's like...
Yeah, I shouldn't say that.
I'm running church services,
Sorry.
So it's like I got to turn things on and off, and like the biggest downtime is during the sermon, which is like 20 minutes, and that's when I answer emails and stuff. Although he probably wouldn't be that happy to hear that I wasn't listening to his stuff.
I retract my statement because I don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
I mean, I think if you're running a band that's playing for like 45 minutes or an hour and a half or something, and once you get them dialed in, for sure, there's more downtime.
That was my case.
I think it's if it's a show where there's a lot of changes, it's
exactly.
You gotta keep on it.
Like if you're a professional and you're working with a band.
If you're a professional.
Well, no, but yeah, like,
right.
And you might have to add certain effects at certain times and stuff like that. For what I was doing, it was like, just random bands coming in, and then.
So if a band had asked you if they'd be like, okay, on the third song, can you just add a whole bunch of delay to my voice?
Definitely.
And then on this song, can you add a phaser?
Yeah, I could have.
Do that kind of thing?
I could have, but honestly, nobody ever did. And I would have been happy to do that, but nobody ever really gave that specific. More, it was just like, generally, can we have this much reverb for the whole show,
Sure.
But these were like bands, we were all like early 20s, so it's like nobody was thinking too hard about anything. Let's be honest here. I don't know. I don't know. That's not true. I mean, whatever. I'm just being hyperbolic. We like to be hyperbolic here.
That's true.
Okay. So used Imager. Or what did I? Illustrator. That's what I used.
Okay.
And it was good.
Nice.
It was good. I should turn myself down because I feel like I'm talking over you because I can.
Also, we came up with a name for the podcast, right?
Oh yeah.
Because last week we weren't quite sure what it was going to be.
Yeah,
So I think we finally come up with a name.
Yeah, we decided not to go with the thing that we were so excited about. Well, I guess we kind of did.
Right.
AMX.
Antushka AMX, exactly.
But yeah, what are we? Plausible deniability. AMX for Antushka and Mr. X. So
Mr. X. Oh yeah. Every day we'd be like, "Hi, Mr. X, how's it going?"
That's right. No names. Plausible deniability.
Right. Plausible.
Therein lies the meaning. But
plausible's such a funny word.
I know.
I was reading something the other day. What was it? It was they were talking about COVID vaccines and the like proposed issues with menstrual cycles and stuff like that.
Right.
And there was a doctor who released a statement saying that it was biologically implausible that the vaccine could have any effect on menstrual cycles, which I thought was a pretty funny statement.
Yeah, it's interesting because like science and medicine's a lot like. I mean, medicine's obviously a professional class, so it's a lot like lawyer speak in that.
Right,
right. And you do have to be very sort of careful with how you choose your words. If you ever watched any of the Fauci depositions, I don't know if they were depositions.
Yeah.
Do you call it that when you're in? No. I don't see.
I don't know. I mean, hearings?
Hearings, yeah. Deposition, I think, is specific if like charges have been laid.
Type of a statement or something.
Or I don't even know. I don't know anything about law.
I don't either.
Okay, maybe we should get off the topic.
Right.
No.
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
No.
All right, so we have a logo, we have a name, plausible deniability, AMX. AMX.
Yeah. We are.
And what are we on so far? We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube.
Yeah, we're on Spotify, YouTube.
Probably on a few others by this point, if it's on
Amazon. and
Amazon.
I haven't set up all the other stuff because like I don't even know if anybody uses Stitcher. I made an Apple account for us, but
okay. I want to put us on the Value for Value network, or the Podcasting 2.0 network.
Okay, cool.
And then that way we get on all the Value for Value platforms like Fountain and stuff.
Right, because that is one thing is that I haven't, I'm always bad at marketing, but I also, part of me, I would be always cool. Obviously, you want to think we're doing this for other people, but part of this is also just to give, it's good to talk to you more often, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
And also a good motivation to sort of read and remember stuff more.
Yes.
Because like I was taking notes.
Yeah, that's really the fun part. Is I took a bunch of notes on what we were reading this week, and I have a lot of thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hope
Turtles All the Way Down comes to mind.
Turtles.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, Turtles All the Way Down, not turtles like the animal. The idea of Turtles All the Way Down.
I'm confused, but
it's
that's good. It's a cliffhanger. Maybe other people are confused.
So tune in. 9 p.m. for the news.
9 p.m., yeah. Port 995, there's a callback. Okay, great.
Oh,
my goodness.
Good one.
No, that's a good call. Any other housekeeping things? So, yeah, marketing and all that, I guess we should talk about at some point. Maybe make an I don't know if we want to make an Instagram and stuff like that.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, we have an email that we can run everything through now, so we can make anything.
That's true. And we should get a phone number for it too, because I've just been using my phone number. And my birth date. We should give it a birth date.
We should.
It's just been my birthday.
But if we give it a birthday that this year it's like too young to do certain things,
right?
It won't be allowed on certain platforms.
Right. Yeah.
I like that.
No, yeah, exactly. We won't.
Like, you're too little.
You can't get on TikTok. You're not 13. But yeah, and then also wondering if we do maybe, because I am sort of thinking especially if I take over more of the editing, like I don't really mind dealing with video. So if we end up deciding that, I don't know if we should.
Okay.
Especially because we're not doing names. It would be kind of funny, though, if we did videos and still just tried to do no names.
I just personally like the purity of a no video podcast.
I do, too. I know. You're right. And you were telling me about those purists who believe podcasts are an audio medium. I'm a purist against purists in some sense.
I love it. Yeah. No. Me too. I don't know if you ever heard. I think I talked about this on a different podcast, but I was playing once at a jam here in Austin, and the bass player. I was told he was some like guy around town, so like don't piss him off or something stupid like that. So I get up on stage, and he was like, "I only know how to play shuffle blues."
Okay.
Which was the weirdest thing ever. And it was like, like no other type of blues either, just shuffle, just boom, ba-doom, 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 ba-doom. Like, really? That's it? And so then I didn't have any shuffle blues tunes in mind, so I called this tune that was just 1-1-4-1, E-E-A-E the whole time. I was like, he's got to be able to play this. It's the easiest thing ever. It's like 2 open strings at the very least.
Right.
And like we play it, and he's like, I can't do this. Please, 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 just begging me, like, please, just shuffle blues.
How old is this guy?
I don't know, he was like 60 or something. Gotcha. It was really weird. And then we get off stage, and he was like really pissed off at me. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, I only ever learned 3 chords. And I was like, that's fine, but what you can't play 2?
Wow. Interesting.
It's really weird.
Yeah. So are you going to play with him again?
No. I mean, I that was just a jam. I haven't been on any gigs with him or anything. It's just weird. I always think about that. It's like, is that cool that he's such a purist, that he's really just a specialist in this one thing, or is that extremely weird?
No, I think it's both. Right. In our society, I guess. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of want to be like we value specialization to sort of an absurd degree sometimes, you know. And this might be an example.
It's a funny thing to be specialized.
But like you put seriously.
I feel like it's like saying I only make scrambled eggs.
Right.
To me, it's that level of specialization. Like you don't make breakfast, or you don't make just scrambled eggs.
No, I mean I agree with you, but I feel like you can find I mean, this is essentially what my program's trying to train us to do, is become hyper specialized in like a specific disease. and just only focus on that and do research only in that. And
but at least you're doing research. Like, at least there's sort of several facets to what you're doing.
Well, there's the general knowledge.
I feel like there isn't enough to a shuffle blues bass player to warrant that.
I know. You know what? You're right. I don't even know why I'm pushing back, because I agree with the fundamental point that you're making.
Right.
And it's like, dude, I mean, how does this guy get gigs if he doesn't? I mean, I guess he just gets.
He just plays 6th Street blues gigs.
And he.
Boom, ba-doom, 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 ba-doom.
And he fully supports himself with music.
I don't know. I don't even know this guy.
Gotcha.
I was just told he's some like big shot. I don't know.
No, I mean, what's that whole thing? Like, don't meet your heroes. I feel like there is also that aspect of like people getting like a folk mentality. I don't know. Maybe there's more depth to this guy than we're just missing too.
Maybe. I mean, I think about it sometimes with bands like AC/DC or something, where it's like they're really good, but like most people wouldn't say that they're the best versions of those musicians. Mm-hmm. Like, not the best drummers, not the best guitar players. Not that Angus Young isn't awesome, but they are able to reproduce those songs note for note every night without really making mistakes, which is pretty impressive.
Something
like they play those songs right every time.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I mean, precision is one thing that was the hardest thing for me with music.
Right. Yeah, we didn't play the songs right every time.
No.
or any time, really.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but that's interesting. Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't play with him again.
All right, do you want to get into some
Vesalius?
Renaissance of medicine?
Definitely.
Vesalius?
Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess my first question, what's your any general thoughts or impressions?
I mean, it sounds to me like these people are kind of loonies.
Yeah, welcome to medicine, man.
Like, I don't think I'd be friends with these guys.
Yeah. With Vesalius? Yeah. Well, okay. So
no, I don't think so.
Should I give a quick background just to remind people who Vesalius is? Sorry, I said I proposed to start one way, and now I'm changing it, so sorry.
Yeah.
But just because now I'm realizing, Vesalius, he was, I guess he was technically Belgian, but I thought he was Flemish, but I think Flemish is all that.
Well, that
exactly.
Flanders is
the whole area, right? Yeah. And then because it was Charles V, right?
Right.
The Holy Roman Empire or whatever.
That's right.
So 15. I think he was born in 15. I can get the exact date. Early 1500s.
Yeah, like the 1520s or something like that. Maybe 1513.
Something like that. Yeah. I underlined it. Anyway, okay, we're going to get better at this as we go on. But anyway,
it also doesn't matter that much.
No, it doesn't. And then he was a doctor. And so basically he was a very important anatomist. And that's sort of the fundamental reason why we're talking about him, because he had this big book called the De Fabrica, which sort of changed anatomy for the better in terms of how it was taught. And this came out in 1543. And so he was trained in Paris and Belgium because of a war that broke out between France and the Holy Roman Empire.
Right.
He had to finish his training back in his homeland in
Belgium.
And then he did a lot of his research in Padua, Italy.
Right.
Yep. After that, and was sort of...
Well, it was the Renaissance.
It was the Renaissance,
was
exactly.
The heart of the Renaissance, right?
So we could talk about all that, but I just thought I'd give a general sort of background. So anyway, so now, sorry, but now I'll get back to the first question, general impression. So it's a good point. I don't know if I'd be friends with him either.
A question I had, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but like when you study the history of music theory, the study of music meant something different in the Middle Ages and even through the Renaissance. It wasn't quite the way that we study music today. So when they're studying medicine and when they're doctors, does that have a different meaning or like variations on meaning than what we think of today?
A little bit.
Or are they just the same people? Like, do they have a practice, an office, and people go to them when they're sick and ask them questions, and people go to them for ailment? Or is it more like they are the keepers of this like special knowledge that is medicine? Yeah,
I mean, so it's a complicated question because it's going to depend on the region. Because like in England, it was like, I don't know when licensing became a very formal thing, but like in England, as you could say late as the 1700s, they were still not requiring you to like go and study medicine. Generally, you would study something, but you could still just become an apprentice to somebody. And also medicine was a little bit more fractured, and like you had barber surgeons, which were called barber surgeons because they were the barbers.
Yeah, they talked about that.
And also surgeons, and they would do a lot of the procedural things, and actually were sort of some of the lowest rung, which is something that this book talks about, because surgery used to be sort of the bottom feeder specialty of medicine, and then it became now it's like these are where a lot of the brightest minds go into. Right. But then also, so it's also complicated because, so that's going to, I don't know when, I honestly just don't know I don't think you ever had to go to school for it until very recently, like maybe in the 19th century when that's kind of where a lot of the modern school and domains of study can be derived to. So, and certainly residency, that structure didn't become a thing until the late 19th, early 20th century with Johns Hopkins is where that came out of. So that didn't exist. So to your question about like, did they have offices and stuff? I think you were more itinerant. There was more of a traveling, you would go to the places more. And he talks about this in the book, how it was still kind of separated as like clinical versus research people. So you'd probably have like people that focused on teaching medicine in the university setting, and they didn't really practice. But then Vesalius, as it talks about, he ended his life actually going and becoming a court doctor in Charles V's imperial court, and so he was just a clinician then. So he was basically, his main patient was the emperor, but or the king. I don't, whatever. But he would also, see the entire, like everybody that's affiliated with the court, and then the last question that you had asked that was that I feel like I haven't addressed. There was one last point. Did you have a question, though?
I mean, I feel like it was more like is a doctor what we think of today? I've read separately, and it might be complete nonsense because I get a slightly different sense from this book that we're reading, that the sort of the profession of doctor as we think about it today is not a whole lot older than the 1800s, and that what doctors were in, say, the 16 and 1700s was something slightly different. Well,
I guess I'd need to know what they were saying, because of course I would agree with that. Like I said, that there was our modern thought of what a doctor is. Yes, I would agree with that.
Well, I guess partially probably a doctor, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but probably a doctor in the 1500s is not for everyone. It's not like anybody who gets sick can just go make an appointment with Vesalius.
No, see, that's where I think, well, maybe, I don't know about specifics for court doctors, but like with David Hartley, who I'm just bringing up as an example because I know a decent about him, and he was an English physician in the early 18th century, so early 1700s. And he was going to be a priest, so he went to Oxford or Cambridge. He went to Cambridge and did all the priestly classes. But then when he got out, he was like, I actually want to be a doctor. So, and it's not really understood whether he took any classes to be a doctor. He just basically was learned enough in Latin, could teach himself, probably read the text like Galen and Vesalius. Vesalius wrote his text in Latin or English. They were probably writing things in English at that point. Because it started, everything would be written in Latin, and then it became liberalized in a sense. So, but to your point, to your question, he would see anybody that essentially could pay. So
you could just make an appointment with him, if you could pay, of course.
So there's going to be doctors that exist like that. A lot of those are going to be also, but then you have apothecaries and chemists, they were like the pharmacists, but they were, kind of in there. And then priests would take up the doctorly profession to a sense, which is why there was like David Hartley, and you had mentioned in the first episode how there's this overlap between priests and doctors.
Yes.
So you would often see and I think more historically, you would see that profession in one, the shaman and the sort of spiritual leader / healer. So that's why it's just a very complicated question. But yes, in terms of the modern sense of a doctor, probably only 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 years old, right? Well, more than that, like 19th century. Yeah, you can see with the groundings and like the way Germany was structuring. In fact, a lot of how academia and K through 12 is structured, I think, is based off of Kaiser Wilhelm's like model, at least K through 12, that idea. But anyway,
I think that's right.
But
as a side point, before we keep going, I just want to make a pin, and maybe not for today, but a different day. I like the idea of talking about how surgeons went from sort of the lowest rung to the highest rung.
Yes,
because I tend to think of surgeons today as kind of like mechanics.
They're glorified technicians.
No, they talk like mechanics.
I'm kidding.
No, I mean glorified technician. No. But
I'm kidding.
But what they're doing to me feels very hands-on, so I can actually imagine it being sort of the bottom rung, like a kind of like a mechanic versus the very heady apothecaries and stuff like that. Yeah. And I'm more interested in how they got put to the top. So that could be an interesting thing.
Money, procedures. That's money. I mean, that's the simple answer. It's because capitalism's going to value the things that make the most revenue, and in the hospital, it's the procedures. So any procedural specialty is going to bring the most money in for the hospitals. So you're going to get the best people going there because you'll be able to also make the most money.
Sure.
But you're right, yeah. So, I mean, and you see this sort of in every profession where there's a general idea that as you get older, sort of understandably, because life is tough, and as we get older, it just becomes harder to live because our bodies unfortunately break down and just, so you want to have an easier life as you get older, regardless, in my opinion. That's sort of the natural progression. You do, because it's like you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to be sleeping on a floor touring. When you're 70, you do that stuff when you're a teenager and you're in your 20s or 30s, or when you can do it, or 40s. I'm being ageist here. I'm just trying to be a realist, I suppose. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm making the point. You see this generally in all professions, I think, for a good reason, but you saw it to maybe a pathological degree in the Renaissance, which is sort of the main point that I would say the author Nuland is making in the Vesalius chapter, that Vesalius was so important because before he came along, they show these pictures of how medicine was taught. It was taught from Galen. Galen's book, and the head teacher was like raised up on a platform away from the body that was being dissected, and then students were sort of not really paying attention around the body, and then the guy was just reading from Galen, and then
I also think that
it was probably exaggerated.
There's some funny parts of the book where like it seems like the author is making a lot out of a picture and like
agreed.
Like obviously in all classrooms, students are not really paying
I agree with
like,
that.
It's pretty funny.
And he also, I like how he disparages these other people, like Wilberg, this historian that wrote about Vesalius. He just like
he's like, Vesalius wouldn't have been that much of an asshole.
Yeah, he's just like, and then this
like, how do you know?
No, and then he's just like coming at him because he's like, and this psychiatrist Wilberg, this makes the big, this armchair psychiatrist makes the big issue of like, because he's but understandably, the guy Wilberg, the historian, it was all in context to when Vesalius was talking about how he used to dissect animals, and then how he would like go and scavenge for body parts to make
I learned a new word. I learned a word in this that was pretty gruesome. Vivisect.
Oh, vivisect. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That sounds not nice.
No, not fun. I
mean, actually, I knew somebody who used to do that. She worked for the VA in the research department. Yeah, and she would just like slice open live mice every day. Yeah,
I almost had to do that, but I didn't end up joining that lab. It's a brutal.
Poor little critters.
Yeah, it's brutal, but thankfully we at least have anesthesia now, so it's more humane. And there's lots of procedures in place to make sure that everything. You know, like there's a lot of there's a lot of things that you have to do to make sure that you're doing everything humanely and that you're well trained.
Right.
Anyway, I just figured I should put that in because I was thinking about that. We talked about animal research last time, and I was just thinking, I think we do the best we can to make everything as humane as possible. And it's just, this is just the...
Humane's a funny word.
Well, yeah. It's true.
Yeah. We do everything we can to make it as humane as possible. Sorry, I wasn't...
Well, with humane being how, I think of empathy of how we would want to be treated, I guess. But yeah, I mean, ultimately we wouldn't want to be in their position.
It would be like, well, give me some anesthetic and then slice me open. I mean, I guess that is basically what we say when we go to surgery.
Exactly. Whenever we do a stent, it's just we need to make sure that we can do these procedures. I mean, again, I'm sort of saying the obvious. Everybody understands why we need to do it.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, so I was Gallon. Oh yeah, so no, I agree. He reads into pictures more than. So just for the people, just for the one or two people listening, which it might be me, re-listening just for whatever swears by myself. No, he posts he posts an old image of how medicine was done, and it was this thing I'm describing, and it's supposed to get at the idea that it's just people for 1,500 years after Galen, who I explained in the previous episode, but Galen was a Roman physician in like 100 AD, and his work was used as the de facto dogma, I guess, for 1,500 years and unquestioned. And so it's a great story of how when you blindly trust authority figures, you get yourself into this position where what if the authorities figure's wrong? And so Vesalius figured that out because he was actually doing dissections himself. And so a lot of his revolution was just him telling people like, look, Galen said this was in the body. I haven't found this in the body. And this is then when people started realizing like, oh, maybe a lot of Galen's work was actually based off of other animal anatomy. So then they show another picture of Vesalius giving an anatomy lecture, and it's like he's up there giving the dissection. Nobody's reading from a book, and then you have just crowds gathered around in close proximity to try to see, because it's this idea that, and this is a fundamental thesis of the of the book, actually, of it's the scientific endeavor that we got from the Greeks, is that you trust your observation, trust your senses, and be skeptical, essentially. And use your observational skills to figure out what the truth is. And that, that's where empiricism came 200 years later. Or 150 even. Less than that. Yeah. But anyway. Because Bacon was in the 1600s, right? And Locke was end of the 1600s.
Right.
Anyway. So anyway, sorry, I'm ranting at you.
No. It's all good. Well, because it brings up that thing that I want to talk about turtles. But actually, I'm curious about this. The idea of where truth lies, and the idea of your senses versus not your senses, right? Because I feel like the way a lot of modern research and sort of academic pursuits and sciences work is sort of well beyond the world of our senses.
Right.
Especially when we're talking about like running correlations and various types of algorithms.
Quantum physics. I mean, this is all about how our senses are deceiving us in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't not even just quantum physics. I mean, statistics, like any economics, anything where there's like sort of series of algorithms and formulas that aren't really understood all the way through, we're like well beyond the space of our senses.
Right.
In fact, we're completely circumventing our senses in the name of data.
Yes. I think well, sorry, did I cut you off?
Well, so the turtles thing, what I'm interested in is there's an idea, I believe it is a Buddhist idea, although it might be, I think it might actually be a Hindu idea, of turtles all the way down, that the world, the world is on the back of a turtle. And if you ask, what is that turtle on top of? Well, that turtle's on top of another turtle. And like the universe is on the back of a turtle, which is on top of a turtle. And you say, well, what if you go all the way to the bottom? What is it? And the answer is it's turtles all the way down.
Right.
And then what I started thinking about is this idea of dissection. So, our body is sort of its own world. And what's in that world? It's organs and muscles and whatever and bones and stuff. And how do we learn that? We zoom in, we dissect, we look into that. And then we can look into an organ and we can start to see cells and various proteins and acids and things like that. And then we can look into that and we can get deeper and deeper and we can get atoms and then we can get subatomic particles. And I see a very turtles all the way down here is that there might actually be no substrate truth. And so zooming in might not actually be we might not be getting closer to truth. We might actually be confusing ourselves.
Yeah.
And then I start to think about macroeconomics versus microeconomics and people like Milton Friedman or Mises and stuff who would talk about how microeconomics is confusing itself by creating these complex formulas to try and sort of mathify human behavior, when actually the truth of the matter can be seen better by zooming out and thinking about sort of broader concepts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point, and I think it's all about just getting at while we might be confusing ourselves, we have made progress in our understanding.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's by
it's
zooming in,
true.
we were able
we
to
have
make
computers,
combustion engines.
we have airplanes, we got all sorts
exactly,
of crazy stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Which is, so that's why I feel like that's the fundamental answer to that point, though, is so of course we're going to confuse ourselves at the bleeding edge of things, but does that mean that...
Well, it's more my curiosity is the idea of truth. So what is truth and where does it lie? Because we can zoom in and we can find something neat and we can try and leverage that in some way.
I think it's reproducibility. I think is truth. It's an important component of it.
Yeah.
Because if you can reproduce something, then you understand a pattern that exists. And that's what a lot of science is about, is trying to find a pattern that exists and then understanding how does that pattern come to be. But you can't even study it if you haven't identified it.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, and in the example you were giving, it's a good one because it's actually pretty simple. Somebody makes a claim there's this organ in the human body. Mm-hmm. It's a great claim because it's super easy to test. It's like a perfect truth claim because it's either true or it's not. Right.
Although it is a little bit, well, we can get into that. But I was going to say, because that brings me back to actually the first point I was going to make when you sort of brought up this idea of the turtles, is that I also think what Vesalius was getting at is that we needed to start somewhere, at least in the West. We were sort of coming out of the dark ages of sort of having been more confused. I would say we got ourselves more confused by sort of not paying attention to our senses and sort of, and that's the point. And it's okay, so you're just going to believe what authorities have written in books.
Yes.
And you're not going to validate any of those with your own experience. Mm-hmm. And so it's they had to learn first. This is first what even is observation. And then as we progressed, the observations became more and more advanced until we were observing things. Because it's you're saying all these things that are true about how we study things that are beyond our senses, but we still translate them into a way that our senses can interpret. And that's we use an instrument that can change the signal into something we can interpret. It all gets back to our senses. Yeah. And that's the point, though, is we're sort of just manipulating reality into an interpretable fashion, which, again, I agree, there's ways that we confuse ourselves in doing that because we're doing more and more manipulation. Maybe that's the point.
We can also trick ourselves into thinking that we're dealing with truth when what we're dealing with is interpretation.
Well, but yes, exactly. No, but Yes, and but this is where you could say, and I guess I feel like I don't completely agree with this, but that the senses are the further away you get from the direct sense experience, the more likely you are to get away from truth. It's like the more you have to interpret the signal before it gets to your sense.
Whether I agree with that or not, I like it. It's a potent statement. I like it.
Yeah.
And it actually and it connects to Vesalius pretty nicely, because I feel like what he was doing, as gruesome as it was a very like sensual or sensuous pursuit. He was seeking bodily construction, right? Trying to understand the actual construction of bodies. And what was that whole thing about the corpus fabrica, the particular distinction of that word fabrica as being something that's in motion or as part of a system, part of an active system.
Right. Yeah, and
I thought that's an interesting distinction, that previous understandings of anatomy were static, and what Vesalius was seeking to illustrate was that these pieces of anatomy exist in dynamic systems or in living systems.
That's a great point. Yeah, and that I sort of hadn't. I remember reading about that, but I hadn't sort of recognized it as significantly as you're pointing it out. Because you're right, yeah, and that was the whole reason why they had the muscle men, which were the sort of famous images in his books of some of the bodies that, like just to present like the musculature. They were all in sort of motion. They were like...
Well, because what's the function of a muscle?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, so his the fabrica, and it was a good point. It was actually good for me to reread this because it's been probably like 8 years since I did. So I was I forgot like some of the details about how let's see.
I like that you're turning actual paper. That's good.
Oh,
mine's on an iPad.
Oh yeah, well it's I go back and forth.
No, I do. I actually like that. I think it's good. I don't like that I'm reading on an iPad.
Sorry, I'm just looking for my notes. Oh, well, okay. So to like some of Gallen's errors, I think were kind of interesting. Right. So there was this thing called the ret mirabile.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which was this coiled vessels at the base of the skull, basically.
Yep.
That Gallen said existed, but Vesalius couldn't ever find. So
what an idiot!
I know.
What is that from? Is there some animal that has those?
I think this might. Let me see if this was the part. Yeah, because there was one. You know what I was thinking actually when he said that, because you do have sort of a bunch of coiled vessels in the skull, the cavernous sinus.
Right. Okay.
Which is not at the base of the skull, but it is sort of towards the bottom of it, almost by the foramen magnum, which is the base of the skull.
Right.
And I wonder if like there is an animal that just has the cavernous sinus more at the base of the skull, just because of how the skull is shaped. But
it also strikes me as possible if what you're doing is you're looking at already semi-decomposed bodies or things like bones or skeletons, that if it's sort of fallen apart, you might not know where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. Well, and this is where
I think about this with dinosaurs all the time. Like, how many errors do we have in putting those skeletons together? Probably a number.
Yeah.
They're probably not perfect.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, you do the best as you can with the I mean, that's the thing, and that's kind of the good thing about science that I think the public maybe understands, but I guess the problem is when we make sort of big decisions quickly, it can be difficult. But it's all about.
I can't think of any time we've.
I don't. Yeah, me neither. I'm not. I'm not trying to be political here, and just like. But
you just mean in theory,
yes,
if someone were to do that
happen, and the public would be, part of the public would be upset with the scientific enterprise. Let's say, it's just it's all about just accumulation of evidence, right? That's what truth, I mean, that's where the reproducibility, that's why I said reproducibility is maybe the most important thing for how we determine truth in science, because that's what the collection of evidence is. It's just like, what studies have more positive evidence that are well done and all that, it's anyway.
Well, this is actually what I'm struggling with a lot lately, which is like, it's sort of peripheral to the Vesalius thing, but the zooming in versus zooming out, I actually see how both are important, and it's like the value of philosophical thinking, and without doing sort of empirical experimentation, but actually just thinking things out, which actually is related to me to religious thinking and faith-based thinking, is a different way of approaching a problem than sort of zooming in to figure out how everything works and what every causal link is. And in a way, both tactics have a fatal flaw in that the zooming out means that you will never actually be able to draw any kind of causal link. All you can do is come up with some sort of broad rationalization, or just faith-based, just following whatever you believe because of your philosophy or something like that.
Right.
And then the fatal flaw of zooming in too much is like a missing the forest for the trees problem, but a turtles all the way down problem, because every link you fill, you create two more that need to be filled.
Yeah.
Like the missing link, right? You fill in the missing link, and now there's two missing links, because how do you get from one to the other?
I think I see what you're saying, but I generally understand, or I generally agree with you, actually, because I was going to say the brain essentially does this. I think it's the right brain that's more of a generalizable thing. It's going to focus on it. Yeah, it's larger, broader concepts connecting things, and the left brain is more detail oriented and more specific. I'm butchering this. There's a book about this. There's a psychiatrist discusses this much more, and I could be flipping them. It's called The Master and His Emissary, I believe. Talks about the data behind how we sort of understand the hemispheres to have these two separate functions because they're so important. It's like when you look at a pattern on the screen too, it's like there's benefits to looking at the whole pattern or zooming in on the pattern. This is essentially what you're saying, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Because it's the context versus, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's easy to denigrate the looking at the whole pattern idea, but what I mean more is doing things by principle. So I've had this argument with on Twitter every now and then with this guy who's he's like a libertarian anarchist kind of guy, but he believes that you don't follow principles because those principles lead you to a desirable outcome. You follow principles because of the virtue of the principle itself, even if following that principle leads you to an undesirable outcome. So to me, this is like essentially a faith system. It's the belief that this principle is good whether or not it leads me somewhere good. Right. In the same way that, I follow God even if that leads me to bad things because God is good, like the whole story of Job in the Bible or something like that.
Okay.
So I find this very confusing because to me the function of having a principle is because you believe that it will lead to good outcomes either locally or long term or something. Even if you think that right now me going for a run sucks because it's going to hurt and it's going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to be out of breath and I'm going to be sweaty and whatever. And so like the locally it's not nice, but long term I think it's going to be good for me or something. That's a principle that you can hold. But you still believe that it's doing something good.
Right. Yeah, I
think that it's this zooming out is this sort of principle-based thinking versus the getting into the weeds of the sort of causal chain-based thinking.
Right. Yeah, with a principle being just a general thing you can hang your hat on. Because that's the interesting thing, don't you think? Is that fundamentally the same mechanism is at play of trying to base. I mean, again, it gets to the narrative idea, but it just for me it goes to just how the brain functions. Is that in order to get somewhere, you need to base it off of something, And
right. I mean, even this Vesalius stuff, it's still principle based, because the principle is that through empirical research and like testing and questioning and things like that, you will find truth. So there is a broad principle governing the entire operation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so kind of on that, one of the things that he also discusses is, God, what was it? I just lost it. Okay. Yeah. No.
no.
I agree. Sorry. I'm trying to also look for this one note. I thought I wrote it down. But I agree with you, I think. Or I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, maybe.
I also thought, so I guess we sort of hit on it, but I guess to emphasize a little bit more of this narrative of going against the grain and having sort of the courage to question authority.
Yep.
Because that was one thing this 28-year-old upstart did. I mean, that's the other crazy thing when you read about, he was already a professor when he was 23 at Padua, and he spent basically 5 years doing his research, and he did a lot of presentation across Europe, giving dissection presentations to people. And in so doing, he sort of garnered a reputation as a bit of a rabble rouser. and his old tutor from Paris, and this is interesting because this guy's actually, in terms of names that you run into when studying anatomy, he's like one of the few who still has his name on certain things in the body. So Jacobus Sylvius. So there's the Sylvian fissure that's named after him.
Nice.
And there's other things too. The Sylvian duct, which is one of the cerebral ducts. So he was an important person, but it sort of goes to show how even though we still remember him as this great anatomist, it's like he was wrong in this. He was had this huge diatribe that he wrote against Vesalius like 10 years after the Fabrica was written.
Right.
Dude was like 73, and he was like basically calling for people to like kill him.
Oh man.
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy. So this was Vesalius's old anatomy teacher from Paris.
Right.
And so it's again just going, you have the courage to go against the grain, and he had the confidence because he had this new system, as you said, this new principled system of basically evidence-based, or just using your senses, going in, figuring out and validating things for yourself, and not just taking everything on face value. And
I mean, it's another principle that I think about not going along with things that you believe to be untrue, and having the courage to speak what you believe to be true as being ultimately good. That's one of those weird things. I almost take that as a faith point, that I think that ultimately it will probably end up it'll end up being for your benefit to do that. Right. Even if it seems like it won't be, even if it seems like in the moment nobody's going to like you just because you're saying things that are unpopular.
Right.
I feel like when I see people doing that, it tends to work out well for them mostly.
Yeah, it's just this idea that we're getting back is like, if you have a good metric for truth, then you should have all the confidence in the world. It's just understanding, do you have the right metric of truth?
But how do you know if you do unless you start saying it?
No,
because I feel like it's similar to playing an instrument. Is you have to be bad at it.
I think it goes back to the system that we keep talking about, and this is the system that he discusses, and this is the system that has gotten us to this point. Whether or not you like it, I guess it is the system. It's the system of reproducibility for truth, of observations, of empiricism, of experiments, of not just taking authority at face value. That's the whole. That's the principle. I think that that gets you out of.
But you cannot take authority at face value and still be wrong.
Yes, because you don't have the system to go. Yeah, because it's not just that. Like I said, it's also you have to go and understand how to set up an experiment to test a hypothesis and everything like that. How do you,
like screw you, mom is not all.
No, how do you isolate the variable to show that, it is because your mom's annoying that you're doing these things? You have to run that experiment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isolating the variable is a real problem, though, especially in medical, in the study of medicine, because you can't ever go back and try not giving that person the medicine.
No, but this is why it also rewards the people that are smart, because this is where this is why it's difficult to be a scientist, because it's like, you have to think about, there are ways to do it, but it's not easy. But you have to, and it's gotten better and better. I mean, you look at the experiments that they used to run, and you're like, wow, there's so many variables. Now we have it so that like you buy the same. I mean, we have lot numbers for things, so that
right.
And yet we still have a reproducibility crisis. Who would have thought?
Well, but that's not necessarily all the system, though. That also has to do with monetary incentives and all sorts of other problems.
Well, it's the system in that it's like, when we talk about reproducibility, it says, I mean, all these things we say as if they're simple, and then when you, like we keep talking about, then you go into the details of it, and it's like, well, how are you running that t-test? Are you doing two-sided? Is it one-sided? How many, what's your power? Like, how many samples do you have? I mean, there's all these other questions that you might have a finding, but you're just not testing it on enough people. And so this is, I'm ranting, but this is another sort of important point I thought that was made in the book about how, and this is why, to your point, it's not just about questioning authority, is Vesalius's genius was also, he gave a very rigorous system of how to test it, and very detailed. And he said you have to look at multiple bodies because there is intervariation. And I see this myself having done dissections. And I mean, it's something we don't like to talk about, but everybody, we are slightly different, especially when it comes to the vessel level. Vessels can be
who doesn't like to talk about this?
Well, it's just, you know, then you get into the shape of skulls, and, you know, it's just, you know what I mean? It's a fine line between
you didn't want to talk about it.
Talking about variations, anatomy, and like brain size. You know what I mean?
Right. But it doesn't have to be. You can just say that there's a wide range of there's a wide range of variation in height. That's just a different, like, people come in tons of different heights.
Right. No, I agree.
Like, that doesn't even have to go that far.
No.
Like,
but I'm just
to
being
get a proper
honest
range
about
on
it.
humans.
Yes,
like,
I know.
Humans tend to be from here to here, and that doesn't even say anything.
Of course. No, I agree with you. I'm just being honest in that. Like, it can be an uncomfortable topic, and I think it's understandable, because there is this history associated with it where the information has been poorly used, as you could say, and extrapolated upon.
This is what a little bit what I was getting at before, though, about like the courage of saying something that's true. Like, to me, there's no reason to have a problem with the idea that there's variance among humans, and that doesn't mean anything other than that.
Yeah, no, and this is why. Yes. It's people don't like to think on a population level either, because it's difficult and probably gets to this.
Sure. Well, I mean, we could argue about things like racial divisions and like why did we come up with those?
Not this early in the podcast.
No. I'm not. I'm saying that you start to get into dangerous territory for sure when you start to categorize people based on at least somewhat arbitrary groupings, for sure.
Right. But, no, and there's a big conversation in science right now in the genetics field that's talking about how we need more studies actually done on races outside of just Caucasian and Caucasian men. Because, I mean, historically, it was done, you know, started in Europe, right? And of course, a lot of, I shouldn't say that, right? Because I
don't know what you're saying. But.
Well, the scientific enterprise didn't start in Europe, right? We sort of picked it up and then ran with it. Although we give the Greeks, I guess, the starting credit, but I'm sure you can like trace it back to Babylonia. I mean, the thing is, though, if you read the Old Testament, they were doing some things in at least proto-scientific ways. That's what I mean. So it's not. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean to say that.
Right.
all I'm saying, though,
like the idea of sort of observing things and testing things.
I
I'm
want to
sure
get
every
off
society
of race.
has
That's
done.
all. How did we get on this? Can we get off?
Well, then
of
let's
this?
get off it. Okay,
No,
all right.
well, hang on. Let me just
hop.
finish the point so that I make sure nobody thinks I'm saying something I'm not saying. All I'm saying.
I don't think they think
I
you
didn't
are.
mean to get on this. Though. I don't know how we
fault.
did.
I'll take the.
All I'm saying is that there were a lot of studies that were done on white people to begin with, because those were the people that were around in Europe, right?
Right.
So that's understandable. And a lot of the dissections were done on dead white people, dead prisoners, executions.
Right.
So that's why a lot of the anatomy books back in the day, especially, were honed. Like, you would look at it and Anyway,
yes.
But now there is I think a very justifiable discussion about how we need to do.
Yeah.
We need to expand these patient populations, especially now that we live in diverse countries.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm having lots of jokes that I'm not going to make.
I know. I just I might just take this whole dang
I'm
section
thinking
out.
terrible things. No, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't take the whole dang section out.
Yeah.
Does dang not count as a...
No.
Oh, you're not supposed to swear. Actually, so here's my question to you.
Yeah.
Does swearing have to do with the actual sound coming out of your mouth, or does it have to do with the meaning behind your utterance? Because I could see that dang could be swearing if you say dang it.
Yeah.
That's the same as saying damn it.
No, I think it's both.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right. Sorry? Yeah,
Sorry.
you should be.
You thought you were going to get me with that.
I didn't think I was going to get you with
did.
it. No, I didn't.
It
wasn't a get you
I'm
with
joking,
it. It's just
I'm
what
joking.
do you consider swearing?
No, I don't know. It's just a stupid thing I'm doing. I don't know. I don't know. It's a public forum.
Right. Trying to be puritanical, ascetic.
This dang whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mother flipping.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we talked about race and the shape of skulls. We covered that. I'm glad.
Wait a minute. You just connected those things. I don't think we had yet connected those things.
No, but we had gotten on it. It was my fault, actually, because we had gotten on it when we were talking about, I think, how
variance.
Variance in bodies.
Yeah.
That's and I was just making the point that that's one example of how Vesalius was detailing this method, is by discussing, don't just look at one body, you need to look at multiple, and then sort of corroborate what are the lasting, structures that you see.
Because maybe only this guy has a liver and nobody else has one.
Maybe. Right. And that'd be crazy. It'd be crazy. I don't think that's true.
If we still had that today, like none of us have livers, but it's just like the one guy did, so we assume everybody does.
Now, they used to, I think certain places put even like more emphasis on the liver, like as like a center of the soul. I don't know. I could be, but it's a big.
Center of the soul.
Well, the thing is,
it is big.
When you open up somebody, the liver is like one of the first things that like pops out at you.
You're like, geez, get that out of there.
Well, it's huge. I mean, it can be huge. I mean, and especially in somebody.
Some of us, it's huge.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. I don't want to like say anything, but compensating or anything. Okay, so okay. I think those were most of the major points I wanted to make. Let me just
the one thing that stuck out to me towards the beginning is we were talking about how before Vesalius, most of the purpose of anatomical drawing was for artists, and they actually had artists dissecting bodies to learn how to better paint.
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit last off, with Da Vinci, right?
Right, but with Da Vinci, it seemed to be a little bit of sort of both, where he was doing something like study as well as doing something like art.
Well, he was doing the study for the art. That was the point.
Right.
That was the point, and that was the point that I think you were rightfully sort of honing in on, that the author was making about, and Da Vinci wasn't the first one. There was some dude that had done it in the 1400s, but Da Vinci did it more detailed and more rigorous, and that was the point that I had made in the last episode, that if the world had seen Da Vinci's publication,
right,
it's who did his drawings 30 years before Vesalius,
right,
in Florence, right?
It's also a different. It's an interesting relationship to the artist, because I feel like it's sort of like we were talking about the barber to surgeon. I feel like the artist has been demoted in society to the point where we would have no reason to believe that an artist should be able to have access to any sort of special stuff in order to learn how to do their art.
Yes, that's a very interesting point, but I think I agree. Yeah.
Today, like they'll do subjects, where somebody will pose naked and stuff, and so they can learn how to paint you and stuff like that. But the importance of the painter, I feel like, especially in the 14 and 1500s. I mean, how important are painters today?
Well, but it's just a different art. It's just a different art form that's important, like a rock star. I'm trying to think, like, could a rock star? I don't know though if a rock star could be like, hey, I need to do dissections to make this piece of music.
So I learned how to make my fingers work better,
Yeah.
No, I don't think they get special access like that.
They
I don't
get
think
special access in some things, though. I mean, that's definitely
with, like, groupies?
Well, or to, like, whatever. You go somewhere and, like, you get into the White House, something like that, example.
Sure. Yeah. But do they need special knowledge?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
or even in maybe you see it more in, like, the film industry, because you see, like, a lot of like directors. Maybe. I don't know if you ever saw Orson Welles, but he also talks about directors as sort of this new modern art form, that, the director is an artist, and that it's just a very, it was a very new form. But they certainly have a lot of power to, but I see what you're saying in terms of, and I mean, this is just the general craziness about Vesalius's life that I was also sort of pointing out. I was like, you would just walk around and there was just a lot more death in everyday, in your everyday occurrence.
He had like that like gallows behind his house.
Yeah, so he grew up and collect
bodies.
Yeah, exactly. He grew up with a gallows.
Weird, man.
Yeah, behind his house. And then when he was in Paris, there was like, there was just gallows that you could go to. I mean, that's the other point. Right. They're talking about like how they would just go and try to steal organs to sort of dissect. And then Vesalius eventually found a decomposing corpse to take his skeleton. And you just think about like what would happen to you today if you did something like that. It's like, it's just ridiculous. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, generally we've just become a lot more buttoned up, I think for the better, right? It's like you can't, you don't have bodies decomposing on the road, and you can't just go take somebody's body and make them your skeleton, your private skeleton for like demonstration. It's just all of this just so crazy. And you wouldn't have prisoners being executed and brought to anatomy labs for dissection like an hour.
There's an interesting ethical question there for me, is if something is sort of like ill-gotten knowledge, so to speak, is it ethical to draw on that knowledge? Or is it maybe not as ill-gotten? Like, it seems to me like there's maybe a hypocrisy here. Either like that knowledge is not knowledge that we should have because it was gotten through unethical means, at which point it seems almost fair to throw it out. If we go back to the legal system, you're talking about, neither of us know law that well. That's true. But as far as I understand it, if something is gotten, if a piece of evidence is gotten sort of out of bounds, it's not supposed to be admissible in court.
Yeah, if there's no
but I would say that most of our anatomical knowledge is sort of ill-gotten from a modern point of view.
Yeah, so I would disagree, I guess, with the premise that we should not use, quote, ill-gotten knowledge, because it's like,
well, I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't. I think it's,
well, I thought that was how it was brought up, because you said I have a problem.
It's a question. It's a question that I have. It's the if knowledge has been gotten through sort of out of bounds means or whatever. I'm not using good language here, but should it be admissible?
Well, here's how I'll give here's how I think about it. If I, God forbid, something happened to me,
right,
that like somebody did a horrible experiment on me and they learned something, obviously I don't want that to happen. Right. And obviously I would want the perpetrators of that to be held to the highest extent of the law. Mm-hmm. But the knowledge coming out of that, I'm like, well, my body's already gone. If the knowledge that was taken from that could benefit somebody, then hell yeah, I want that to happen.
Sure.
Dang it.
Sure.
Heck yes.
Right. Heck yeah. Where's the paddle?
Yeah, so I mean, that's how I kind of feel about it. It's like I think this is essentially what we decided too, because this is people use the knowledge that the Nazis,
as in like society or something.
Yeah, it's like people. There were horrible experiments done that the Nazis did.
Yep.
But we used that knowledge. We used their rocket knowledge too. It's like we've done. Yep. I mean, we're very guilty of this if that's the case, as you've already said with past. But I guess I'm even saying like, the more immediate example would be
I think that if this ethic is something that would be held, we are definitely guilty of it. I'm not sure if it is or isn't a good ethic, but the question comes up in my mind that it's something to think about.
No, I think if anything good can come out of something bad, then might as well.
Right. And then I start thinking religious thoughts. Can good things come out of something bad? Theologically, is that possible?
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I have no idea.
No. These are good questions, and I'm sure we could come up with a scenario where I would disagree with what I just said. That as long as something that you should use a good thing that comes out of a bad thing, maybe there's an example that I'm not thinking of right now.
Well, I think that there's the reason I bring up the legal example is there's a reason that it feels unfair that if the police broke the rules, they should be able to use that against us, whether we're guilty or not. Whether that is true or not, we still feel as if the bureaucracy has to follow its own rules in order to be fair, like be playing a fair game with the citizens. And so with medicine, it's tricky because what are we looking for in terms of a fair game?
Right. And essentially, we're getting back at the thing that you said, the last episode about a greater good. And because like that taken to its extreme becomes a greater good scenario. And, and I don't.
Right. Well, because it's definitely for the greater good for the criminal to be in jail, in theory. Right. I mean, you could disagree with that statement. I'm not saying that statement is definitely true. I'm saying that from the perspective of a legal system, it's for the greater good for criminals to be locked in jail or punished or whatever.
Right.
And so it would be for the greater good for the legal system to then cheat in the name of making sure that the criminals don't get away with it.
Yeah, and then you get in. Ultimately, you take that to a Minority Report extreme.
Right. Exactly. Tom Cruise every time.
Yeah, it always comes back to that. Always comes back to Tom Cruise.
Right. What the hell?
Yeah. It's Tom Cruise all the way down, as they say in ancient Indian philosophy.
There we go. Tom Cruise all the way down.
Yeah.
Potential episode 2.
That might be the name. No, it should probably be Vesalius or something. But Tom Cruise all the way down.
How about Vesalius parentheses Tom Cruise all the way down?
Yeah. Or Turtles all the way down. Tom Cruise and Turtles.
Tom Cruise and Turtles. There's another good title.
Yeah.
So what should we do next time?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we could stay on this book or we could move to...
Yeah, I'd be down to do a couple more out of this one.
I was going to say, or we jump to something else, or we jump to something... Like we could jump to Renaissance music or something that's more in your domain. Because you were bringing up a good point about the Renaissance that we didn't really touch on any of that. But yeah, I don't know if that's interesting for people.
I don't know.
I find it interesting.
I mean, I'm down to do maybe a couple more out of this one, and then hop to something else. Maybe, I don't know. Was there another section of this book you thought was interesting?
Yeah, no, definitely. So William
was the only good chapter.
No, William Harvey's interesting. John Hunter I discussed. He's very interesting. Excuse me. René Laennec, he's kind of interesting. He's the guy that invented the stethoscope. Semmelweis is very interesting. I guess maybe I should say a little bit about
the germ theory before germs.
Yeah, so Harvey would be interesting if you wanted to talk about circulation. That's what he did.
Okay.
John Hunter.
Yeah. You mentioned that last time.
John Hunter, I forget what his big thing that he did, but he was just a famous surgeon. I think just general surgical technique, I think.
Right.
And he was an interesting guy. I told that story about the giant, and he has a famous anatomy museum that still exists in London. Lanac, stethoscope. Semmelweis, interesting. He was, the germ theory before germ theory. So he actually predates like Koch's postulates and Lister and Pasteur in sort of putting together the idea that you need to wash your hands before you do things because you could have germs on them.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting one to me because I think about that a lot. And
and he's another guy that sort of went against the dogma. Nobody believed him, and he's one of those, like, there's these random examples of scientists and mathematicians from the 19th century that will end their life in a asylum. Cantor's another example, the mathematician, the infinity guy, the Cantor's set. Yeah, he was in and out of institutions. And Semmelweis ended his life in an institution as well because he was just eccentric, and I don't know. He could have been, had mental issues, but it also could have been caused by all the backlash. That was sort of, it's been a while since I read, but that was sort of one thing I remember thinking. So so that would be interesting. There's also Origins of General Anesthesia is an interesting story that brings us to America. That's sort of the first time America's really discussed in this book for, and there were like 3 people. NPR has done a thing on that though, so I don't know. We can leave with that. Yeah, they talk about, because it's it takes place in the famous experiment with anesthesia. The first famous one took place at Harvard, and
sure.
Thing. Rudolf Virchow is interesting, although I think he was an anti-Semite. Yeah, but he was a really interesting guy because he was sort of around in like the 1850s in Germany. So he was in 1848 when there was that big social revolution that occurred, and he got pushed out of Vienna where he was practicing. So he was just but he was like the father of like cell biology in some sense. In pathology. So he was like one of the first people to be a proponent of diagnosing diseases with microscope slides. So I don't know if that's as interesting.
The anti-Semite part. It's funny that you.
That was something I learned.
A lot of
after
people are anti-Semitic, though.
No, because I remember I read the chapter. I was like, dude, this guy's awesome. And then I was reading his Wikipedia. I was like, dang it. Dang it.
I mean, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, I did think it was interesting when they were talking about how the university system in Europe at least owes some of its tradition to the like Jewish rabbinical school
definitely.
tradition.
Yeah. Because I had also felt like
Yeshiva.
I read like all the knowledge because like all the knowledge that the institutions were taking, my understanding, like obviously the Latin texts, whatever was left over from Rome, but then you had a lot of Arabic-speaking Jewish people when they sort of migrated into Europe. They brought all this knowledge from the Arabian Enlightenment.
Right.
And the rest is history. Then we started using Arabic. We were like, dude, why Arabic numerals? We were like, why have we been using Roman numerals this whole time? This is so much more convenient. Okay. Lister is interesting. He's a Scottish surgeon, end of the 19th century, and he's the guy who was Listerine is from him. He was aseptic technique basically for surgery. So he came after Semmelweis, but he sort of popularized the idea that you need to wash your hands with acid, essentially. Halstead, I said he would be interesting. He was like Johns Hopkins surgeon, had a morphine addiction, and a big like the residency program kind of came out of him.
Well, I think for next time, the which was the one that sounded kind of interesting. the
threw a lot
Semmelweis.
Yeah.
You want to do that one for next time?
Sure. That works.
Cool. Sweet.
Ignach.
Right. That's a good name.
Yeah. It's Hungarian.
Yeah. Nice.
They actually I think have like a statue of him in Hungary. I figure what we'll do is we can get on a schedule eventually. But I'll probably just push this out as soon as I can.
Oh, really?
Well, I guess, do you want me to wait? Maybe I should wait.
Good.
I don't know. Maybe I'll wait. Yeah,
why don't we wait?
You're right. We should wait. So
we don't wind up in a situation where we like accidentally don't have one.
Sure. So Thursday then or something? Maybe Friday. What did we say we would do? For releasing.
Wednesdays?
When would we release?
Oh, yeah, Thursday or Friday is fine. I don't think it matters. Thursday's good. I like that day.
Yeah, Thursday's good. I'm just trying to think because I'm trying to think about, and we don't have to talk about this but I'm trying to think about routine, so how long will it take me to edit something? One day turnaround's a bit much, but a 2 or 3 day turnaround I could do. But that pushes us into a weekend release. Not that it really matters. Again, we have no marketing plan, but
boy. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, you just send it to me and we'll shoot for a Thursday release this time.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
See ya.
Cool. All right. Well, is that it? All right.
No, sorry.
See everybody
I don't
next
know.
time.
I just assumed that we were done, but I don't know. Is there anything else that we...
Oh, well, do we want to say goodbye?
Yeah, we probably
to
should.
The folks?
Also, did we discuss
folks.
everything? I think we discussed everything. Yeah.
I mean, I think the episode's fine. It's just more, do we want to have some kind of ending?
Conclusion is, question authority.
Yeah. Just be real punk rock
about it. Be like Vesalius.
Yeah. Right. Be like Vesalius.
Vesalius was like the first punk rocker.
Right. We didn't talk about how he died. He did have like kind of a sad ending. He was going to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and then he got shipwrecked and died, I think, kind of young, probably like early 40s or something. That's no good. I didn't make it that far.
Yeah. So R.I.P.
All right. Well, yeah, right. R.I.P. Sorry, Vesalius. I was hoping we could meet up sometime. But
cool. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Right.
If
right,
you just send me the audio and we'll be good.
Adios.
All right.
I'm gonna hit stop. Bye.